Chapter 55 Kara. Day and I study for the upcoming quals. I catch him up to where we are in the textbook, but thankfully there's not much that he isn't familiar with. Eventually he does have to leave. His host family would probably be worried about him if he just disappeared from school and didn't come back until after dark. I go to clean up the cups and plates from the living room, but Blue's already piling them up. The scene gives me a little bit of pause. Stars, it's absurd how used to sharing this space I've gotten. I've gotten used to having Blue around, and just this day and a half of distant attitude has me falling back on old isolationist habits. This is the first time I've actually had guests, people other than Shauna in the living room. It's a little disturbing how much I was expecting to be alone after I closed the door. I had been resigned to the quiet and solitude as I ushered them out. A smile comes to my face unbidden. Blue's still here. I don't know why that wasn't at the forefront of my mind, but I had fully expected an empty house. It's funny. He's usually at the forefront of my thoughts. I've gotten used to consuming worry being ever present in my head. It takes me a moment to remember why I wasn't concerned. Enoki had pulled Blue away from the study party developing in the living room. They never left the room, but they kept to themselves. Given the scene they had back at the lab, I was a bit worried about leaving them together. But it seems the fear was unfounded. They just sat together and talked. Low, hushed tones, and sometimes stuttering giggles and pointed looks over to where we sat at the table. But nothing concerning. I'm glad that Blue seems to be finding some friends. And if not friends, then at least people he feels safe enough around. I'm finding it hard to predict Blue's actions. I would have expected him to cling to me, sit over by the couch nearly catatonic based on the way he's reacted to others in the past. But he's constantly surprising me. Especially right now. He's not speaking to me. Hasn't looked up or made much of a sound through days in my improv study session. He hadn't even acknowledged us after he delivered the tea. He and Enoki just split to the other side of the room. I had been rather excited at the prospect of Blue making friends, so I hadn't thought anything of it. But Blue's still being distant, even though they've left. He's just focused on stacking the plates and cups into one pile, not paying me any mind, or perhaps deliberately trying to ignore me. There's something wrong. It's been wrong for the past few days. As much as I've been trying to regain some of the closeness we'd shared before the whole casting nightmare, Blue remains distant. He's healing up nicely, but the wounds that I'm more concerned about are not the easily healed physical ones. Blue, how are you doing? I try to make my voice soft and make my approach as obvious as possible. I don't want my presence to be a surprise. I'm fine, he answers softly, keeping his focus on the dishes he's stacking into a precarious pile. Despite the hesitance, Blue's attitude is won from me. I can't help the smile that pulls at my lips. Some things never change, and it seems that Blue will always, withdrawn attitude or no, try to take on more than he should. I move to take the plates from him, but before I can scoop the pile up, he flinches. The sudden movement startles me, but it does force me to stop my approach. I've got it, Blue stutters, pulling the pile closer and lifting the dishes without any of the hesitance or shakiness in his voice. Yeah, but you don't have to, I counter, keeping my palms visible and halting my advance like I'm talking to a frightened animal. The second the comparison comes to mind, I don't know if I should be worried that it's insulting or following that instinct further. I've been just sitting here going over the textbook. I need to do something with my hands or I'll go crazy. I eventually come up with what I hope is a reasonable excuse. Blue looks conflicted. But if he planned to say anything, he bails on it quickly as he scoots aside, allowing me to take the dishes. It takes a bit of finesse to pick them all up without knocking them from their pile, but it's not impossible. Blue just watches me, not looking angry or relieved when I take them. He doesn't say anything, just follows along quietly by my side as I make my way to the kitchen. He's clearly ready to step in case I need any help. How about I'll wash, you want to dry? I offer shakily. I don't know what to do with his silence. It puts me on edge. I'm trying to reclaim some of the calm that I'd felt with the others here, the comfort that we've been able to take in each other's company. But there's a tension that I can't disperse. Blue nods jerkily. I can do that. All right, I acquiesce. I highly doubt that I should let him. There's a part of me that wrestles with the idea of how useful it would be to get him to sit down and actually drink some of the tea he made for us. Anuki hadn't had a problem taking from the plates. Either way, I'm pretty sure I would have to make it an order, and that seems more harmful than helpful. Either way, we won't get anything done by avoiding each other. I've tried to give him his space, and it's gotten us nowhere. In fact, the space might have actually hindered us. If nothing else, Blue is trapped with me so long as we're doing the dishes. So at least we can talk. I pass off the dish towel, trying to figure out how to start asking questions without being overbearing, when I notice that he takes the towel with a wince. Are you all right? I ask. Yes, master, Blue answers quickly, twisting the towel in his hands. His face flushes as he ducks his head in order to hide his eyes. He's hiding something from me. Why and what can be handled later, but for the meantime I try to swallow the pain that wells up in my chest at the sight. I thought we'd gotten past this. I thought we'd gotten to the point that he'd tell me if something was wrong. But obviously even that trust has been shattered. I take his palm and pull the towel away from it. I see small, reddened and inflamed puncture marks, the thin, fragile-looking scabs peppering down his palms where the skin was broken. Blue, what is this? I ghost my fingers over the inflamed area, feeling the radiating heat, but unwilling to put any pressure against the fragile skin. It's... He stutters, pulling weakly away from my hold. For some reason, that manages to hurt more than anything. That he'd feel safer away from me, even though he's obviously hurt and in need of medical attention. I know I should probably release his wrist, let him go so he doesn't feel trapped, but my grip tightens. What happened to you? I ask, trying to keep my voice at a level state of calm. I broke a cup, he whispers like it's some grave sin. What? Confusion colors my voice as I struggle to understand what exactly he's talking about. When Anuki and I were here, we were getting tea and I broke a cup. He stutters out like it's an explanation. But how did you get hurt? I ask. I was trying to clean it up and it was an accident, he whimpers, tugging on my arm weakly, trying to get out of my hold. Why didn't you tell me? My voice dips into a whisper. I didn't want to be a bother. You had your guest and He stutters out, but even with the thoughts incomplete, I don't like where he was going. Blue, I don't mean for the warning tone in my voice to be threatening, but Blue looks panicked nonetheless. You have more important things to do. I'm not worth your time. He looks me in the eye for the first time since the channeling, and I can see the tears that are gathering at the corners of his eyes. Blue, don't say that. That is not true, I say, but Blue's eyes drop back down to the floor and I force a little more authority into my tone. I don't want to hear you say anything like that, ever again. Understand? I'm not overly fond of orders. I don't like how they've made Blue react in the past, and I don't like to invoke the power that I do have over him. Even still, I try my best to make this sound like an order, and the effect is immediate, though not exactly what I wanted. Blue's whole body goes tense, and there's a faint trembling in his limbs that I might not have noticed if I wasn't holding his arm. He tries to speak, stuttering out syllables as he starts to cry. Blue, I prompt, knowing he feels uncomfortable. All he has to do is say the two little affirmation words that he's said thousands of times before. Even if he doesn't mean it now, I want him to at least have the idea in his head, and I want him to know that I mean it. I can't. He looks up at me, panicked. Master, I'm not supposed to lie to you. His voice cracks. It's not a lie. I smile down at him, but even I know it's weak and shaky. This would be a lot easier if I could show him the smile I use on the other students, but he knows what the real one looks like. I suppose that's the downside of getting close to someone. They get the chance to really know when you're lying. It isn't? His voice cracks to a shrill pitch as he tries to yank his arm out of my grip. You're really going to keep me as a familiar? I'm useless! I can't be used for spellcasting. I could get you hurt. Blue, you are important to me. I know the casting wasn't... Look, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how it would affect you. I try to explain as evenly as I can, pulling him closer despite the whirlwind of limbs he's using as his escape attempt. It takes a moment for my words to sink in. I loop my other arm closely around his waist, pulling him loosely into my body. I can feel where I've squeezed him too hard, where his arm might have a bruise in the morning, but I'm not quite willing to give him the chance to run away just yet. He nods, but I can see the caution in his eyes. He doesn't believe me, and I don't blame him. I've provided a bunch of fanciful promises with absolutely no hard suggestions. It's partially my fault. I could feed him some lie about a position he'd fulfill in the house instead of being a familiar. There's a part of me that's scared of what he might take his new position to mean. As nightmarish as his assumptions are of his current position, it has become at least somewhat predictable. I don't know if I'll be able to handle any of that. But aside from what nightmares my mind tries to cook up in relation to the duties of a housekeeper, I do need Blue to remain my familiar. I haven't thought of a way to get him out of the slot safely, and honestly, the more I look, the less there is. The care and keeping of familiars course requires that we keep the one familiar for the entire semester, so even if I found someone else who could take Blue's place, I doubt the school would allow it. My thoughts turn back to the cages, the marketplace where I'd gotten Blue. It seems like so long ago, but I never want to see that place again. Just the memories of going inside to buy Blue make me sick inside. I'm not sure I'd be able to walk in and make an informed choice with what I know now. I doubt I'd be able to walk in and not buy up as many as I could. I close my eyes and take a deep breath, giving myself a second to find some fractal of peace before I try again. Blue, you are very important to me. I may not end up keeping you as a familiar, but we will cross that road when we come to it. All right? I'm not going to throw you away, or get angry because you need medical attention. You're not a bother. You are my responsibility. Understand? He stutters, giving me a fearful look. Come with me. Sit down on the chair, and I'm going to get you some ointment. How are you feeling? Does anything else hurt? I ask as I settle him down in one of the kitchen chairs. My head, he admits sheepishly. All right. How did you feel after the pills yesterday? Did those work well for you, or did they make you feel sick? I ask, pulling out my first aid box. They were fine, Blue stutters out, and I find that when he's not looking at me, he does actually smile. All right, I answer, pulling out the bottle of pain pills. It's not much, but it's a start. We've been here before, when we were still new to each other and we weren't sure what to expect. Fear and uncertainty clouded our judgment, and we made rash choices. We'd gotten past it before. We learned how to trust each other. I have faith we can do it again. You know the drill. Only two, and they might make you sleepy, but I try to fend off the uncomfortable silence by running my mouth when there's a loud banging from the back door. Both Blue and I startle at the sudden noise, but it doesn't go away. It takes a second for my brain to translate the noise as rather insistent knocking. I feel my heart nearly stop in my chest, the whole world moving slow around me, as I try to make sense of what anyone would be here this late, knocking on my back door.
Kara, you better be fucking home right now.
Thana's panicked voice carries into the kitchen, and I have to remind myself to breathe. Right, Thana. Thana knows where I live, and would be more inclined to take the back door rather than the front. He also wouldn't be back unless he needed help, and judging by his overwrought tone, it's probably an emergency. I rush over to the door, unlatching the lock and throwing the door open. I'm here, Stars, what the heck? The words die on my lips. Thana's clothes are ripped, and there's no sign of the outer jacket that he'd been using the last time we'd met. But most notably, there's blood all down the side of his face that I suspect comes from a wound on the side of his head. The hair around it is saturated in clotting blood, and where it pools at the neck, the blood has already begun drying. Before I can even comment on that, ask how or why, I see the wide-eyed woman standing behind him. She's dressed in the same style of shaggy and ruined clothing that Thana was, and as my gaze falls on her, she withdraws even further into her space. She isn't a small person, but she's doing the best she can, pulling her large wings in, even as they tremble. She's practiced at keeping her visual as small as possible, I note. I nearly missed the subtle action she'd taken, clutching a bundle of fabric closer to her body. I feel my mouth gape at the scene before me, unable to summon words or even a truly coherent thought. My eyes find Thana again. He's still standing, though using the doorframe for support in a way that's truly concerning, and though I can see the pain brimming in his eyes, he's still conscious.
We need your help,